In a seemingly uneventful parking lot, where people come and go without much notice, a camera managed to capture a profoundly poignant moment. When you witness what was left behind, your emotions will stir and tears may flow. While parking lots are typically mundane and unremarkable places, this particular camera in Vancouver unexpectedly recorded something heart-wrenching and astonishing. It will leave you questioning the depths of human coldness and cruelty. Zoe, a loyal 14-year-old dog, had been an integral part of her family for most of her life. Cherishing every moment spent with them, she relished walks and playful moments in the yard. However, lately, her owners had been displaying a cruel and distant attitude towards her. They neglected her, taking her out less often and forgetting to feed her at times. Despite this mistreatment, Zoe remained loving, friendly, and devoted to her owners, seeing them as her beloved parents since puppyhood. The diminishing attention hurt, but one day there was a glimmer of hope. Zoe's owner informed her they were going for a long overdue walk, and she eagerly jumped into the car, excited at the prospect of reconnecting with them. Even at 14 years old, her enthusiasm was unbridled as they embarked on the journey. After hours of driving, they arrived at a desolate parking lot, with nothing much in sight except for a wooded area and a surveillance camera perched atop a tall post. Little did poor Zoe know that her life was about to take a heart-wrenching turn, leaving you pondering how anyone could be so heartless and unkind to an innocent animal. Zoe's owner stepped out of the car and walked around the vehicle to let the dog out. As soon as the door opened, Zoe leaped out, tail wagging and ready to get walking, but instead of clipping a leash to her collar, the owner walked back to the driver's side of the car, got in, and turned the car on. Zoe wandered in front of the car, confused as to what was going on, and after several long seconds, the owner turned the car off and got out again. The camera watched on as the lady led Zoe into the woods. The dog's tail was wagging enthusiastically, and she trotted along happily next to her owner. For close to 5 minutes, the lady and her dog went out of view of the camera and all seemed normal. Perhaps they had just gone on a walk, like they used to in happier times gone by, but the shocking and devastating twist is still yet to come. The woman suddenly came running back to her car, this time without the dog alongside her. The camera watched as she jumped behind the wheel, started up the car, and sped out of the parking lot, leaving nothing but a black tire mark as she sped away. Several seconds passed and out of the woods came walking Zoe. Looking around for her owner, Zoe was used to running off and having fun, but she would always return to her owner after a few moments just to make sure she was still there. And every time, her owner had been there, but this time was different this time. Her owner wasn't there. She looked around, left and right, in search of her owner, but couldn't find her. Zoe cautiously trotted back into the trees to see if she could find the lady that had brought her out for a walk, but she was nowhere to be seen. Sadly, Zoe would never see her beloved owners again. The confused dog wandered back out of the wooded area and looked around at where her owner's car had been only moments before, but there was no sign of the car. Nor was there any sign of the owner. Zoe let out a lone whine. Maybe her owner would be back soon. They had been on thousands of walks, and not once had she been left alone like this. The camera watched on as the dog started to circle around at the parking lot, stopping and sniffing at the exact areas where she had jumped out of the car and where her owner had been standing. Zoe wandered around the parking lot, repeatedly barking and whining, hoping that her owner would hear her. Her ears would prick up whenever a car would drive by down the road that passed the parking lot, but none turned in. Slowly, Zoe's tail stopped wagging and she sat down, her ears drooping and her eyes sad. Was this it? Was she destined to be left alone for the rest of her life? Or would her fortunes change? Zoe just didn't know. Suddenly, as night was starting to fall, Zoe heard a noise. The camera picked up another car pulling into the parking lot, this one containing a young couple and their 2 children. They had intended to come out for a nice cool evening stroll around the woods, but had not expected to be welcomed by a lonely dog. Zoe followed the car as it slowly turned around in the parking lot. It was truly a sad sight to behold. She was desperate for affection and love, and was starting to feel like no one wanted her. So Zoe was delighted when the car came to a stop and the driver got out. The man had a kind face and bent down to stroke the golden Labrador, looking at the tag on her collar and seeing her name. The rest of the family all got out and started to fuss over the dog, unsure of whom she belonged to and why she was there. They all agreed to wait for a few hours in hopes that Zoe's owners would return. But as darkness started to draw in, it became clear that the poor, beautiful old dog had been abandoned. But what could this young family do to help her? They made the decision to take her home. They opened the trunk of the car and ushered Zoe in. She was nervous and scared. She started shaking a little as she sat in the unfamiliar car. She had never experienced something like this before in her life. Zoe whined quietly. She looked around for familiar people, but she recognized no one, and all the smells were foreign to her. These were not her owners, but they seemed kind and kept stroking her and speaking to her softly, so she enjoyed the attention. The family took Zoe home and led her out of the car, where she wandered around their large yard before sitting on their porch. She stayed, looking intently down the drive, as if waiting for her owner to come and pick her up. Her owner, of course, was never going to return. She softly whined and laid down as if resigned to her fate. The family were concerned for the poor dog and quickly called the animal shelter. Soon enough, someone from the shelter came out and gave the beautiful golden Labrador once over, concluding that she was in perfect health, save for the usual signs of an aging dog. But now the new family had two options. They either let Zoe go with the vet to the shelter or keep her. For a dog of her age, there was little chance that Zoe would ever be adopted. Spending her golden years in a shelter was no way for such a beautiful and gentle dog to live. People wanted to adopt puppies and young dogs, seeing old dogs as a waste of money. After all, they only had a few years left. After a lot of pondering and discussion, the family finally made up their mind. They made the firm decision to keep Zoe as a beloved member of their family, and that's precisely what they did. Zoe lived out the remainder of her life joyfully alongside the family that had discovered her. They showered her with care, attentiveness, and affection, ensuring she experienced a life filled with love and happiness until she peacefully passed away at the remarkable age of 16, even in her final days. Though Zoe occasionally pondered if her old owner would ever come back to bring her home, she found solace in knowing that her new family was the best place for her. In their care, she experienced a life full of happiness and contentment, feeling loved and cherished until the very end. Now the stage is yours. What are your impressions of this heart-rending tale? Could you ever fathom abandoning your beloved family pets in such a callous and frigid manner? Furthermore, how would you have reacted if you encountered that forlorn stray dog, desperately seeking love and affection? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Thank you for sharing your insights.